Right. Great stuff from Folk Implosion. And before I go to the news story, I actually want to acknowledge a really key comment over on Rumble. And if you want to join all the really good folks on Rumble, please do so. But SMU Hosky, Smuhosky, already, right in here with a comment that I want to serve up to everybody who, whether you're watching live now or not. He says, NATO has been stringing Turkey along for decades. They will use them and drop them. Why even pretend they will let Turkey in the European economic bloc? They have an enormous army and are strategically placed. Yes, nailing it, brother, nailing it. All right, let me go over to, I wanted to get a lot of different strains on this to sort of mention our fake band from college, The Strain. I wanted to go with a number of different strains on this because I heard about it first on RT. Then I recorded it from RT. I got the coverage from RT. Then I went over to RT and I got the news article. So that's first off in the news notes as the Russians and I gathered in our meeting room and tried to assess how exactly we should be handling this thing. Okay, so what was interesting was then hearing comments from people like Larry Johnson, people like Nima Akorshid, and others discussing this really, I think, profound move in the history of the Middle East, especially showing what I think could be one of the final nails in the coffin of this thing that I think many people thought was over, the flotsam and jetsam that might have been left over from the British Empire, and the Ottoman Empire as well. Both of those, I grew up just thinking those were ancient history, but evidently, obviously, growing up with a Saudi family that was just put in there at the close of the British Empire, and then the breakup of all these countries with just drawings essentially on paper that said, oh, well, we'll have Iraq here, and then Iran will be over here, while the Persians are sort of split off a little bit, and so on. All these things now, I'm realizing that they had been going on while I was a kid, and now the dust is finally, I think, starting to settle. We'll see what happens with the Saudi regime and, of course, Turkey. Now, Erdogan has been back and forth on this. We know, actually, the CIA was supposedly involved with a plot to assassinate him, so he buttered up to the U.S. They have held him in their thrall for quite a while, but it looks like he's breaking away, and I think it's probably pretty smart. We'll go into the economic news in just a minute. Let me give you this. And oh, by the way, I'll get to that story about the Fox News thing. It confirms what we discussed yesterday. It's not a big one, but let me give you this one. A massive story. Have Pakistan, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia just launched an Islamic NATO? RT World News has this covered. Okay. So let me see what you think, because I think this is a pretty good article, and then I want to go to some of the other people on this. Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and Turkey signed a defense pact on Friday, sparking talk of a NATO-style group that could alter the regional power balance. I want to go back to the news notes and note again. Remember, Saudi, Pakistan, and Turkey are forming a NATO-like mutual defense bloc. This brings together many threads of analysis and thought. First being that Turkey is a NATO member. And this seems to indicate that Erdogan knows his nation will be targeted by NATO and the Israel-U.S. alliance once Ukraine falls. I think that is inevitable if Ukraine sues for peace. And I think they will sue for peace. Second, this is a response to the fact that Iran has shown that U.S. bases in Saudi and other Middle Eastern nations have not defended them. And third, this has a bearing on the Saudi-Yemen conflict, which this complicates things dramatically, okay? As I mentioned here, since Yemen and Iran are important for Pakistan and Turkey economically, but don't forget, Turkey still sells tons of oil to Israel. But Saudi has been attacking Yemen on behalf of the United States, and that ramped up recently with the tax on Aramco back. And now Yemen is blocking U.S., Saudi, and Israeli shipping in the Red Sea. How does this all shake out? I think the answer is it's impossible to tell, but this is the breaking news. So unfortunately, it's open to a lot of speculation, and all we can report is what I'm seeing and getting some keen wisdom from other people. I tried to reach somebody in Washington today, wasn't able to get through. So just going on this, the bloc's formation comes amid a volatile security situation in the Middle East, triggered by the U.S.-Israeli attacks on Iran. Tehran's retaliation against Gulf monarchies who have been traditional U.S. allies has exposed the limitations of the American security umbrella and forced the Gulf Arabs to think of alternative security frameworks. Now, my thoughts, to be fair, I was trying to think about how can I be fair to the audience about what is going through my head here, because initially maybe I thought other people might think, I didn't think this way, but I thought other people might think that they're doing this as an aggressive response to Iran, because Iran and Yemen have been involved in attacking these Gulf nations like Saudi, like Qatar, like Kuwait, and like the UAE, right? And then sort of getting into occasional conflicts with Oman over the southern strait tier and Iran controlling the northern tier in the strait, right? So there's a lot of complications there. But I started to think about this, and it was interesting because I heard some other confirmed, I didn't record it, later on RT, about how, and somebody else actually mentioned this, it might have been Larry Johnson on with Nima. No, it was Anthony Aguilar, I think, and I've got that segment. It seems like these people are understanding that they cannot stop Iran and Yemen from controlling the straits. So I don't know about you, but what I think is going on here is I think that they eventually will include Iran and Yemen. And the Houthis, Ansar Allah, they've worked very hard to knock out essentially the proxy government that's there. And so they'll probably be in control of most of the nation. But I think these people are looking 2, 3, 5 years down the line. And they're looking at what they have already seen demonstrated by the Iranians and by Ansar Allah for the Strait of Hormuz and the Red Sea, respectively. And they're saying, look, if Iran easily can control the Strait of Hormuz, and the Bab al-Mandeb Strait can be controlled by Yemen very easily as well, then I think this is just the first part of something that is going to be a much larger regional, probably mostly Shia controlled, even though there's Sunni here as well, controlled and dominated organization. This is very interesting. The pact was signed in Mecca by Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan, and Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif. So they've been working on this for a while. You know, they don't just go in and sign stuff. It's all been prepared for weeks. Pakistan's foreign ministry said in a statement that an armed attack on any one of the three countries would be regarded as an attack against them all, much like Article 5 for NATO. However, whether such an attack would elicit a combined military response on the lines of NATO's Article 5, well, that is not clear. Still, the military alliance between three Sunni Muslim countries offers a powerful symbolism in a region racked by conflict. So will they welcome the Shias in here? Because if they do, they'll be dominated by Shias. This is really, really tricky. And I'm still trying to figure this out. The chairman of the Saudi-based think tank Gulf Research Center, Abdulaziz Sagir, told Reuters, quote, "The trilateral framework could strengthen the three countries' collective diplomatic and defense weight while contributing to the emergence of a more regionally driven security architecture." And finally, the three players bring very powerful assets to the grouping. Of course, Pakistan has nukes. Turkey, they say, has a robust defense industry. They certainly do. And the second largest military in NATO. And Saudi Arabia, the world's biggest crude exporter, has the financial muscle apart from a military bristling with American weapons. The problem is they're not liquid. The Saudis by the way, there's a chart. You'll see it. The zero oil went out through the Red Sea from Saudi Arabia or the Suez Canal to the United States over the past week. Zero oil from Saudi to the United States. That's astounding. Let me give you some more information on this, and I'll show you what we're talking about here. Over at the Substack, these are the news notes that we've got. Let me give you this, okay? First, I'm going to start this off with Larry Wilkerson and Larry Johnson, because they opened the show on Dialogue Works with this.
Hi, everybody. Today's Thursday, August 7th, 2026, and our dear friends, Colonel Wilkerson and Larry Johnson are here with us. Welcome back.
All right, wait a second. It's Thursday, August 7th?
No, it's Friday. So
Okay.
It's Friday,
Man,
yeah.
Man, you're like, you're in a time warp.
A slip of the Brazilian
It's because
tongue.
we were talking a lot before coming to the live, and I'm just...
Hey, that's a mistake us old guys are supposed to make. Come on.
Yeah, this is Friday, guys. Whoever is listening to us, it's Friday, August 7th. And let me start, Colonel, with you and with what's going on in the West Asia, and a new defense pact is coming. You know, Turkey, together with Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, they have signed a new defense pact, and it means that an attack on one of them, it's going to be an attack on all of them. It means it said that, but the Erdogan said that it's going to be some sort of disagreement based on collective deterrence will contribute to advancing our security and defense cooperation, developing joint projects in defense industry, and combating terrorism. This is what was mentioned by Erdogan. Here is the question, Colonel. What is your understanding of the necessity of this for Saudi Arabia? We know that Saudi Arabia is somehow is asking for this, in my opinion. I don't know what is your perception, and what is the outcome of this for the region as a consequence of the ongoing war in the West Asia?
Well, I think I would say right off the bat that it expresses MBS's and the Royals in general concern over the increasing lack of concern with regard to their security of the United States of America. But when you said that, and you said it had an Article 5, the first thought that ran into my mind was, okay, let's say that we really screw the pooch here even deeper than we already have, and Iran does go to the second and third and even fourth tier of targets that I know it probably has in its computers, as it were. I just want to see what Turkey and Pakistan do if those targets are in Saudi Arabia, which I suspect several of them are.
All right, everybody. We had the internet go on and off about 3 times there. And I tried to get out some comments there because over on Rumble, I thought there was a really astute comment from Nostra who said, Guard, this alliance is no different than the alliance just signed between Poland and Germany. And that was absolutely so astute, really, really good thinking. And so I just wanted to bring that up. It remains to be seen what Comcast is going to do. We might lose the connection anytime. I don't know exactly what's going on. We got no announcements from them or anything. But, you know, what can you do? So if we lost you and you stayed with us, thanks for doing so. And I really appreciate you doing that. That's great of you. And yes, we are back. So there you go. All right. So let me get back into this story. Okay. I'm going to give you some other coverage here that I think is really important. And I don't exactly, we're just flying blind here because of Comcast. So I want to go back over into this coverage about this group and close this off. And hopefully I was able to get that comment in there from Nostra, because I thought that that was important. And I mentioned, but we might have been off. I mentioned that agreement between Poland and Germany, this mutual defense mutual come to their aid agreement, which is sort of over and above a NATO agreement between Germany and Poland, sees Germany and Poland both claiming that they together can control the Baltic, which is astounding. And it also mixes in that sort of mentality that Benjamin Netanyahu is seeing with Section 219 of the NDAA. They're going to be working on mutual defense corporate contracts to build weapons of destruction, of course. But let me head on over back into this Middle East thing and sort of bounce back after the tech, now that we're back here for you, okay? And I want to double check. Looks like we are. Yeah, looks like all the tech is. Once you come back, you have to click on StreamYard. You got to click again that you're going to be sharing your audio and your screen. Let me go to this for you here.
Iran. That's not necessarily the case. This is the alliance of a coalition to be the future of.
Right. So Anthony Aguilar, he pretty much answered the question I had, which was, are these people getting together to possibly battle Yemen and Iran, or is there a longer term strategy going on here?
Security guarantee of security in the region without the United States. This alliance growing is not necessarily in its intent a response to or a defense against Iran. This is more so a defense to future influence and encroachment by the United States in the region, where powers in the region have made it clear, United States, your word is no longer valuable here. You didn't defend us in this war with like these agreements. When you look at these nations, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, these nations don't have U.S. bases there because they bleed red, white, and blue and they love America. It's transactional. You want to have your bases here? We want security guarantees. Protect us and defend us. The United States turned its back on these allies at a critical time, in the face of which Iran is still standing. Iran's still there. Iran still has the ability to reach out and strike any one of these nations. In fact, with the Khorram Shah 4 ballistic missile, Iran can reach all the way to the fronts of Northern Europe and Central Africa. And they still have that capability. And it hasn't been defeated and it hasn't been destroyed. So what some may see right now, especially in the Western world, through the Western perspective, this alliance is growing because of big bad Iran. That's not the case. This alliance is forming and will grow. And to your point, I think the next nations we'll see join could be Qatar, Bahrain, eventually even Kuwait, and then surely potentially Iran. And then if Iran, there too comes Iraq. And if you consider this alliance, it's more so a response to the United States no longer being the guarantor of security in the region.
Yeah, I think that's what's going on. And Nima had said the same thing. And Anthony acknowledged the great point that he brought up. He said, I think you're onto something there. I think you're absolutely right. Now, I want to give you some of the RT coverage of this, because RT, they were the first to expose me to this information. So let me give this to you right over here from the good folks at RT. And I also want to discuss some of the major moves that are being made on the Ukraine front. We'll talk about that later as I scroll through. I'm just seeing that, and I'm reminding myself that I got to make sure that I give you that information. So here we go, everybody. This is coming out of that Ukraine report and Ukraine-Russia report, the attack by the Ukrainians on that beachfront area in Russia. But here is that information about this new trilateral agreement, which looks like it's going to grow.
Because they make easy targets, they don't get shot back.
A new security bloc is emerging in the Islamic world. Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and Turkiye have signed a landmark defense pact. The deal stipulates that an armed attack against any one of the three states will be considered an attack against all.
The agreement is intended to strengthen collective deterrence against any act of aggression and stipulates that any armed attack against any one of the three states shall be regarded as an attack against them all. It further provides for the enhancement of all aspects of defense cooperation among the three states.
The agreement reached between Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Pakistan is a significant milestone in regional affairs. Now, the biggest question here is this going to essentially tackle or rival NATO? We understand that the security alignment between the three states has very similar resemblances compared to that security pact. An attack on any one of these three nations is an attack on all, but of course we need to understand what these three states bring to the table. Turkey has its defense infrastructure, Pakistan has its nuclear weapons, and Saudi Arabia has the money, well, the military capability to, well, at least the money to provide the military capability. And we understand that the agreement is, of course, one of many more milestones to come. We understand that the three countries have also pledged to increase military cooperation and infrastructure development, whatever it may be. There is a lot on the table. And we understand that they will discuss a lot more of these terms as time goes by. But of course, this was in the making for quite some time as well. In 2025, last year, Saudi Arabia and Pakistan had essentially signed a mutual defense agreement, which suggested an attack on any one of those two states was an attack on both. And of course, we understood that there were reports suggesting that this would expand to other actors in the region. And in 2026, on Friday, Turkey joined that agreement, and it seems to be expanding. And we understand that it's not limited to these three countries per se. On Thursday, Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan said that Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and Egypt would be holding a security council of sorts in September, that they may hold a meeting in September to discuss the developments in Lebanon to tackle regional crises, which also suggests that there is room for improvement, room for expansion, and it could, of course, include other members across the region. Now, one thing that is significant, these three states are, of course, Sunni majority Muslim states. We understand that the ideology, of course, to a large degree, is very similar. And of course, we understand that the catalyst could have very well been Israel's actions in the region. Its war against the Gazans in Gaza, its war against Lebanon and Iran. So there is a lot on the table, but we also need to understand what this means moving forward. We understand, for example, Pakistan and Saudi Arabia signed an agreement last year. Pakistan signed an agreement with Kuwait. Pakistan and Turkey have had military agreements that have been in place to develop military capabilities over the past few years, especially in naval military capabilities, and that is only going to expand. And what we also know at this point, of course, is that Turkey is a NATO member country. It does bring more to the table than its military defense infrastructure. We also understand that it is one of the largest military powers in the NATO alliance, and it has that force with it. But of course, we also understand that there's a great discussion as to whether or not this means whether this pact will rival Washington, whether it will rival Tel Aviv, whether it will rival Tehran. We don't necessarily understand, because we do know that Tom Barak, of course, endorsed this trilateral meeting between Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Pakistan, which also suggests to a certain degree that the United States may be on board. But of course, we understand that the policies that Israel is partaking is definitely not in line with these three states. And depending on how things progress, the three states could very well rival Israel in the region. And let's not forget, for the past few months, we've been discussing whether Turkey would be the next Iran. Israel has targeted the Turkish state, its military, its leaders and officials, time and time again. Of course, this was a back and forth between the two, but we understand that if Israel has any ambitions to attack Turkey, then it will, of course, have to deal with Saudi Arabia and Pakistan as well.
All right. That is a big, big deal. That's huge. And so I don't know what to make of it, but I want to give you a couple other things when it comes to the Middle East and show you a couple other items just real quick, because I also want to give you some of the other warfare coverage from Russia. Very important news about United States involvement, as we suspected, in those recent terrorist attacks. First, Lebanon. Trees, fields, homes, hospitals, schools, bridges, and of course, water stations. How charming. Here's Sarah. You can follow her at SAHOURAXO. Israel is burning the water station in Wadi al-Saluk, South Lebanon. Not a military target, a civilian lifeline. Destroy the water, destroy the means of survival. Yeah, this is an act of genocide. Absolutely right. And then we'll go past the Ukraine material. I want to get into a couple other items here. Just real quick, Gaza, if I can get into the Gaza stuff. Oh, I'll skip the Gaza stuff. It's down the bottom. Now, I want to head over to the Ukraine information since we sort of run out of a little time there with that glitch from Comcast. There is a major story coming out of Russia, and this is something else. Hackers have obtained evidence of NATO's direct involvement in terrorist attacks carried out by Ukraine on Russian territory, just as we suspected. Specialists in hybrid threats linked to NATO provided Kiev with intelligence on targets within the Russian Federation, primarily energy infrastructure facilities and shadow fleet vessels, of course, because you know how important it is to get oil out there, Donald Trump. I thought you were going to leave NATO. No, the U.S. still funds nearly 70% of NATO, which, of course, were subsequently struck by drones and unmanned surface vessels. Remember when Ukrainian drones attacked oil terminals in the Leningrad region at the beginning of July? Do you know who provides them with their precise coordinates, loading data, and other non-public information? Who is egging Ukraine on to commit acts of terror in the Kaliningrad region? Today, we will show you documents and correspondence that will clarify many things, and we will introduce you to a very interesting person. So meet Bart de Wacher, a specialist in hybrid warfare. He currently works for an organization called HAVN, Hybrid Analysis Vigilant Network, which is linked to NATO's Special Operations Forces and Intelligence. His email address points directly to this. This gentleman explicitly states that he deals with matters such as, and this is leaked, 1, the Russian shadow fleet, 2, proxy networks, 3, the use of migration as a tool of pressure, weaponized migration, and 4, Russian houses, likely referring to the network of Russian cultural centers. Bart de Wacher sends intelligence information to an SBU representative containing the coordinates of oil and gas terminals in the Leningrad and Kaliningrad regions, as well as a Gazprom tanker transporting liquefied natural gas. He does this so the SBU representative can share the intelligence, quote, with those who need it. He also proposes an online meeting to be joined by his boss from intelligence. That's his boss named Martin, evidently. For his part, the SBU proposes including his own expert in the correspondence, SBO Major Mikhail Marchenko. He is a specialist in areas such as hybrid threats, the activities of Russian intelligence, and security services in the spheres of espionage and sabotage, and information operations in modern conflicts. We are documenting the fact that NATO is taking direct part in strikes on Russian territory. Moreover, after drone raids, specialists in hybrid warfare and information operations begin their work. We have long said that Ukraine is simply being used for a war against Russia, and that the architects of this war are not sitting in Kiev, but in quiet European cities. And we know that these documents will be of interest not only to journalists. We are Beregini. We know everything. So these are the people who got their hands on the documents. These are the documents. And the Russian government has spoken about this. So this is not some speculative item. And perhaps it's being used by the Russians for propagandistic purposes. Let me give you this. This is from Margarita Simeonin, who's the head of RT. Russian hackers, similar headline, have obtained evidence of NATO's direct involvement in strikes on Russian territory, according to documents they anonymously provided to TASS. Now, people might say, this is nothing new, G-Man, and I agree with you, but this is important that it solidifies and exposes it with the documents. This is like when Benjamin Netanyahu actually showed the map of the Greater Israel Project, right? Bart DeWatcher is a specialist in hybrid warfare. He currently works for HAVN, Hybrid Analyse Vigilant Network. According to their information, Bart DeWatcher sent a representative of the Security Service of Ukraine, SBU, intelligence data containing the coordinates of oil and gas terminals in the Leningrad and Kaliningrad regions, as well as a Gazprom tanker transporting liquefied natural gas. So there's the headline for you from TASS. NATO's participation in strikes against Russia, what Russian hackers found in documents on Ukrainian armed force attacks. Now, does that have a bearing on this? Does that mean that we should keep this in mind when we're talking about the attacks on Russians? Here's Rachel Rubel with RT.
Candidates themselves.
I'm Rachel Rubel, live in Moscow. This is RT International. Russian authorities have fully demined a Ukrainian naval drone off the Crimean coast, where Kiev had attempted to launch yet another attack on a popular resort. RT's Roman Kosterov has the details.
The Kiev regime has once again demonstrated its terrorist nature by trying to attack a Russian resort area. This time the target was in Crimea, in the city of Yalta, which is a popular vacation spot for multiple generations of Russians. In other words, there are no military installations there, and everything in Yalta is designed to serve millions of vacationers.
So let's pause it there. So we've got vacationers, we've got people on a beach killed over the past few days, literally people swimming, seeing the explosion on the shore on the opposite side of the bay. 7 people killed just a few days ago, blown apart, right? Then we've got the other side of the story, which is this SBU connection targeting natural gas and oil for Russia. So is there the argument that we're going to hear, and I'm using that in the passive voice intentionally, is the argument going to be that, well, even though this is natural gas that's used for civilians and they need it to heat their homes and hospitals use it and things like that, it's really not civilian infrastructure, and it's something that the Russians need in the government for resources or finances to further their war, so it's a valid target. How about this? How about I not be made a target for this? And how about we remember that all of this has starved Europe of fuel, and Merz is out. Merz is leaving on the 10th because of the very situation that he and others pushed in Germany to starve the Germans of natural gas and oil, partially because of their green push, partially because of their support for Ukraine and not questioning when pipelines are destroyed, like the Nord Stream pipeline. That mindset, that we don't care about the local guy mindset, is now manifested in one more item that I want to give you, and then we'll be joined by Ferb, because I want to touch on the economics in the United States before I then fold it over into the fascist economy that has been growing and growing in the United States, and we see it manifested on the ground in Utah. Let's go over to the first story inside the news notes, and here it is. U.S. Economy Part 1. Fox is trying to shape the new abysmal economic data as a function of consumers responding to the Fed not dropping interest rates. I actually heard them say that this morning. They not only are offering utter nonsense. You get what I'm saying? When did the Fed announce their rates? Did that last for 4 months, or did they just announce it a little over a week ago? So the measurement of the economy over the past month and a half and American consumer behavior somehow was so affected by the Fed announcement that they weren't going to reduce interest rates, which is what the Trumpers want, because they had to refinance a bunch of government debt for the $40 trillion in debt U.S. government. And they want a weaker U.S. dollar so that Americans won't be able to afford as much foreign stuff because somehow that's evil. So it's going to be harder for you to get a payoff for your earnings. They want the lower interest rates to artificially pump up a boom, which is fake. It's based on moral hazard boom, investment in reckless things, resource allocation that goes to things where normally at regular interest rates, not lower interest rates, people wouldn't invest in those things because it would be too risky. Trump wanted lower rates, but we got the announcement only recently. So how is it that Americans are so in line with Donald Trump that somehow they could foresee with their crystal balls that the new Fed chair would keep rates the same? And somehow now Fox News can argue, you see, the problem with the economy and employment and GDP, it's all the Fed's fault. They didn't lower interest rates. That was only a few days ago that they didn't lower interest rates. All the rest of it was speculation over the month. So how can that be the driving factor? Of course it's not. So I said here, Fox is trying to shape the new abysmal economic data as a function of consumers responding to the Fed not dropping interest rates. They not only are offering utter nonsense regarding what concerns consumers, they aren't even paying attention to the fact that the news of Fed rates staying the same only came out last week. So here's Aaron Rupar, and here's the bad news on the economy. And again, they can't increase U.S. refining capacity until at least the end of next year. They can't do it. They don't have the refining capacity ready. Fox Business, revisions for June, down employment by 37,000, and May revised downward by 66,000 jobs. That's 103,000 fewer jobs created in the months of June and May, says Maria Bartiromo. No, it's not that they weren't created. It's that they exist in the first place. Those are unemployed people. They're not employed. It's not that the jobs were created. It's that it's possible that people who were working aren't working. We don't know where the ratio is on this. We just don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And we also have revisions actually for June and other revisions. Lauren, did you have those numbers?
Revisions for June, Maria, down by 37,000. May down by 66. Combined 103,000 fewer jobs created in the months of May and June, Maria.
Yeah. And that is all about the market reaction today, is all about what this means for the Federal Reserve. Louis Navellier, how do you want to allocate capital in this environment where, once again, we're talking about Goldilocks, a Goldilocks macro story?
So again, they're trying to blame the Federal Reserve for not lowering interest rates. And of course, they're signaling the Federal Reserve better lower interest rates. What does that have to do with an economy? What does that have to do with productivity? Nothing. Fiat currency foist on people through legal tender laws merely means that people with government guns are forcing you to take something that's not backed up with anything valuable. It doesn't give you choice at all. So let's go further down into the news notes and talk more about the fascist economy in part 2. We put that first part at the start of the news notes, and we've got more on the economy. And by the way, if you want to see a little more about the trucking industry and more about the immigration crackdown, that again is pushing costs up for food, look at all these stories on the immigration police state. If you think you're living in the land of the free, that's just today. Those are, I don't even know, I didn't even count how many stories of egregious government ICE stories. And we're going to touch on a couple of the big ones regarding birthright citizenship in a second. But look at this. Tied to our coverage of Trump's appearance yesterday in Vegas, applauding himself for siphoning away our money via tariffs, we should note that he appeared at, you got it, a casino. He bankrupted multiple casinos, By Jove, that's apt. And here it is, the latest. Trump talks up the economy at a Las Vegas casino. So if you look over at our Rumble channel and our YouTube channel, you'll see that one of the breakout segments focuses specifically on what Donald Trump said about how he loves tariffs and tariffs have made America rich. Utterly false. Completely false. And we got the numbers in the video. I said them on the show last night. I can call them up again from the news notes yesterday. They're in yesterday's news notes for the subscribers at my Substack. You don't extract money from consumers and say that you're wealthy. Ahead of November's midterm elections, Trump is making a rare appearance in Nevada Wednesday to sell voters, this was last Wednesday, just a couple days ago, on his handling of the economy against a backdrop of high interest rates. They claim they're high. A national housing shortage. No. Listen to this. There's a glut of houses. They can't sell them. The ratio, we've said it here multiple times. There isn't a national housing shortage. There's a shortage of houses that have been liquidated. They have to be liquidated. They're too expensive. The reason they're too expensive is just like what they did in the W administration and preceding that under Clinton is they pumped up people to build houses. Now they've got all these houses, and as we said, the ratio of homes for sale versus people wanting homes was the highest it had been in 40-something years. And just recently, there was another story about how suddenly a lot of people who had been keeping their houses on the market are now pulling them off the market because they haven't been selling. That's not a shortage in housing. How can anybody say that? And what are high interest rates? They're only high if you want to completely destroy the buying power of the unit of currency you're using, make it look like American exports are great because the dollar is worthless and foreigners buy more of our stuff, but we can't buy their stuff and our dollar's worthless. So Trump seemed to shore up support for Republicans ahead of the November elections. This is what it's all about. And this is what they're doing with Israel as well. That's why they're sliding the combination for the NDAA into the NDAA and not having explicit defense financing going over to Israel. That's what they want. They want it subtly done. And of course, Trump is going to attack Iran again and then pull back and then attack again and then pull back until probably, and I think Patrick Henningsen is on to this, until finally a few weeks before the election, Trump comes up with this wonderful victory. And that will be your October surprise. And he'll claim victory even though he doesn't have any victory. It'll be just basically another MOU or another JCPOA. But he'll say it was a victory. Abdul al-Sayed has won Michigan's Democrat U.S. Senate nomination, defeating U.S. Representative Haley Stevens in a massive victory for the party's progressive wing in a battleground state. Well, look, she was hardcore lefty too. The difference between them was support from Israel. You're not going to claim that suddenly Donald Trump is up against a bunch of communists, a bunch of collectivists. He's a collectivist. And the thing that gets me about this, too, is if you're one of the MAGA people out there and you're claiming that you agree with Donald Trump, there's this amazing new battle against a new Red Scare with people like al-Sayed and the mayor of New York, Mondami, right? Suddenly there's this terrible Red Scare and they're all now appropriately labeled communists, right? Even though you're supporting a fascist collectivist in Donald Trump, clearly a fascist collectivist by any definition. You don't buy 10% of Intel and not be a fascist. You don't invade states contrary to Article 4, Section 4, contrary to the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, Sixth and Eighth Amendments, and somehow not squeak by and not get labeled a fascist. You don't shoot people in Minnesota who are simply trying to get away from cops without being labeled on the other side a violent fascist. You don't take away due process and ship people to CCOT without being labeled a fascist. Those are all things that are appropriate, whether one looks at economic fascism or the classic brown shirt fascism that people taught us only in school was it's not good to dislike other people. That's essentially the lesson you get about fascism there. They don't teach you about economic fascism, the real fascism, which is what, Mussolini was pushing after he had been heading up the Marxist group in Italy. So what amazes me is they're labeling these people communists. And what does that do? That underscores the fact that they're desperate to try to label anyone who is in favor of peace as a communist. So what's that going to do? That runs counter to their purposes. That's actually going to attract some people to say, you know what? If you're going to call me that, okay, I'm a communist. And there'll be younger people who are teenagers who are just getting into politics, and they'll be attracted now, Donald, because you errantly use the term communist to broad brush and scare and boogeyman everybody into thinking that people like El Said are somehow massively different than the other Democrats that were up for office who were supported by Israel. They're not. They're all collectivists, just like you are, Donald. And they're going to drive the economy just like you into the crapper. Wow, it's just astounding. Astounding. And just like Merz and von der Leyen and all the others involved in NATO and the EU and all these other national leaders in Europe who, as we said a year ago, were going to start trying to steer their economies into a wartime economy mode, that's what Donald Trump wants. He wants auto plants to start making munitions. Really? He wants to plunk down a bunch of money for ice cages in warehouses in your state. Really? He wants a wartime grip on your wallet and your rights. And it is leading to fascism. And one of the angles of fascism that we're seeing, and people are fighting it, is the AI data center.